right, and we are good, and we are live. So, welcome everybody to our June listening club. Uh, this month, we listened to "Speak for Yourself" by Imogen Heap, which I think was released in 2004. I don't have it up right now, but I do have it in a different slide. But before we get to that point, uh, just to introduce my cohorts here. I'm joined by Beckett, who is the facilitator of Dragonfly Arts Group, who is what this is for. It's the Dragonfly Arts Collective June Listening Club. We're a Facebook group, and you can find us on Facebook. That is where we're mainly operating out of. I think you can find links for that. I think we're also like Meetup. Uh, but we do lots of things with community, so you absolutely can stay updated either through our Facebook group or through our Instagram page, which isn't updated all that much, or this YouTube page. Becca's just nodding. I'm watching her as I'm trying to get all this information right that I don't usually talk about.
Best place to find us is on our Facebook group.
Yeah.
Which is Facebook/groups/Dragonfly Arts group.
I can actually probably put it up. You can find it now at the bottom of the screen.
Yay.
This is just one of 3 clubs. We do have 2 other clubs that we have here at the Dragonfly Arts Collective. We have this listening club. We also have a monthly movie club, which this month we watched Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. We actually had the discussion for it last night, which is why there are no dates on my club list right now. This is our last club for the month. But you can still find that online. You can comment and join on the discussion after the fact. You can join in on this discussion while we're talking, or also if you're watching this on a replay. We always like to hear people's comments. We also have a quarterly book club for the next month or so. We're reading Leonardo da Vinci by Walter Isaacson, and you can join that discussion at the end of July when we have it. We don't have a date set yet. We kind of base the dates on when everybody is available. So if you want to be a part of that discussion, just reach out to us, and we usually do these on a first come, first serve basis. I try to keep it at 4 people. We did have 4 people for this call, but unfortunately, our friend Miguel is sick today and unable to join us. Despite that, he sent me a very, very long message of his opinions for it. So it's almost like he's here. So on that note, yeah, we can get started. I was kind of right with my 2004 date. So this album was released on July 18th, 2005. It finished recording in 2004, and I actually remember this fact of it, she booked the mastering session for the end of December of 2004 before she wrote anything for the album. So that was like her deadline for writing and producing and recording everything. She gave herself a year. She booked the mastering session and was like, I got to get it done by then.
Wow.
And I think she did pretty much all of this. Yeah, she did all of this like in her own, like, I think she booked some studio time, but a lot of it was like recorded in her apartment, which I feel like you can kind of tell is very minimal listing of people on there. Although I do like that Jeff Beck played the guitar on Good Night and Go.
That's not a song that I really think about the guitar on.
It's
like,
true.
how does the guitar part even go?
I don't know. I can't sing it to you or anything along those lines. It's a very ethereal album. This album's a vibe.
Yes.
So I always have to ask, is this your first time listening to this album or Imogen Heap in general?
So for myself, no and no. This is one of my all-time favorite albums.
You actually suggested it. This was your pick.
For me,
Yep.
for me, yes and yes.
For Miguel, it was also yes and yes. He had never heard of Imogen Heap before.
What about you, Rebecca?
I have listened to this album, and I've listened to a lot of Imogen Heap. I think I brought up when I was initially posting this, and I'm sure you can tell from listening to it, I wouldn't say that she's a synth geek, but she falls into the same category.
Mm-hmm.
She is an artist who is all about innovation, and even like the way that she wrote a lot of this album. She actually has a company that she either like is the she's the founder of it, I guess. I don't know like actually how much. It's Mimu gloves. Mimu gloves. Anyways, you guys should look this up because they're really cool. They are like movement-based MIDI controller gloves.
Oh, cool.
So it's essentially I don't know how much you guys know about like how DAWs and MIDI and CC programming work. But essentially when you see those, you can send a code for a specific pad on like a launch pad. You see like a lot of people online doing DJ stuff where they'll press a button and it will like trigger a sequence. You usually do that through a CC program, which essentially is just like you press this button and the code for that sends it out. And they're gloves that you can assign that to. They come with like their own program, so you can do like lighting as well. You can do lighting through that, as well as like triggering samples or triggering specific things.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah, she does like you can like watch her perform with them as well. This is a long way around to say Imogen Heap just really, really likes innovation with music. I had to look up. She is like a classically trained musician. She was classically trained on piano and cello and clarinet. But the way that she writes strikes me as like somebody who really likes music but does not think about music theory at all and just does what she thinks is fun. And has like a really, really good ear, but I think she just does what she wants.
I could kind of see that. I think the only song that I would disagree with that statement on is, you know, the one that I'm sure we're going to talk about most, which is Hide and Seek, because that song takes a lot of precision, and I feel like there was a lot of very careful thinking about putting it together.
I actually disagree with that. I don't think that there's a lot of precision with it. But we can talk about that. My second question that I always have to ask before I get is what everybody's favorite song was on this album, if you had a favorite song.
Hide and Seek. It's like, for me, it's just such a seminal piece, and it defines a good portion of my youth that like I found myself just transported back in time listening to that again, and actually like got really emotional.
I was 14 when the album came out, and it also just sounds like my youth, my teenage years. It's a very specific sound, the sounds of the early 2000s or mid 2000s.
Yeah. The rest of the album is very much like more along the lines of pop culture music at the time, but like that song, it always gets me.
Tim, had you ever heard that song before?
I might have, but I'm not aware of it. I had heard of Imogen Heap, and I was kind of aware of who she was and what she did, but I'd never actually listened to her before this. And reading about her style before I listened to this, I had this impression that it might be something like like a more poppy Portishead, maybe, was the impression that I got just reading about her. But then listening to her and this album, it seemed like very smart progressive pop, and the various styles that I heard, and hide and seek, I just went back and listened to, and as soon as I heard the first line, when I first heard that, I thought of Laurie Anderson. She reminded me a lot of Laurie Anderson. But the rest of the album seems like the closest thing I could come to sounded like a meeting of Peter Gabriel and Annie DeFranco, was kind of the sense that I got. She's incredibly inventive. Um, uh, I've only listened to the album twice, so I can't really speak too much to the lyrics. I would have to spend a lot more time with it. But from a musical perspective, I mean, this is not, this was not the new Stevie Nicks album, obviously. It just, it seems like a very smart album for a musician, and she's and I wonder, in listening to it, I could hear a lot of stuff that I've heard in current pop artists, and I wonder how many of them were actually influenced by her. Mostly women. I don't really hear it in the male contemporary pop artists, but a lot of the women that I've heard remind me of what I'm hearing here.
I asked if you'd heard that before, because I find that Imogen Heap, like most people's introduction, is through TV shows, especially like TV shows from that time frame where like there's an emotional beat and a song playing over it. Like it's Hide and Seek, or I think Good Night and Go.
Mhm.
I found out that the song Just for Now was written specifically for the show The OC, but they thought it was too dark. And also, this was her second solo album, but she was a part of a band called Frou Frou before this album came out, and they were heavily featured on the soundtrack for Garden State. Which
I think that's actually how I came across her to
But they
begin
only
with.
had one album, right?
Yeah, I think so. I feel like the Garden State soundtrack like defined like a specific like part of my generation.
Yeah.
The soundtrack. It's got like
Yeah.
Iron and Wine. It has 07, is that the name of their band? Which is the singer for that is Sia.
Wow, I didn't know that, really.
Yeah. 07 was her band, and then she did a bunch of really like insane stuff, and I include Sia in the same vein as Imogen Heap. Her stuff before she started hiding her face, especially. I actually think that my favorite song from this album, and it's for a really strange reason, I like the last 3 songs on this album a lot, but I like I Am in Love with You because for some reason, just every single time you listen to the song Just for Now, and it like ends on like this very slow and like ambient thing, and then I Am in Love with You comes in with the bass, and it's just like a complete vibe shift, and it's just like a little jarring. Wakes you up. And I also just really like when I said it, and just like how it just like builds very, very slowly.
Yeah, that one is very cinematic.
Yeah, probably.
I would say. I also really like the first one. I mean, you can't go wrong with Headlock. Like, it's such a great way to open an album, and the way that it starts and then slowly builds up. And then which one? Clear the Area. I really like that song too.
Any
Tim, which
opinions
song
on
stood out to
songs?
you?
Headlock really stuck with me. I don't know whether that's because it was the first. Huh?
What?
What?
Are there any songs that stood out to you, Tim?
Oh, I thought yeah, but I don't know whether it's because of the song or whether it's just because it was the first song on the album, and so I've heard it, I've heard it twice as opposed to the other songs. I think I've heard the first 4 songs twice, and then the rest of the album I only heard once. But yeah, Headlock stood out for me immediately. Uh, and then the only other one that stood out was the one that you mentioned before, Hide and Seek, and that was because I immediately thought of Laurie Anderson when I heard what she was doing with the doubling of her voice.
So in his list of his long list of comments that I'm trying to scroll through, Miguel brought up her live performance from 2010 at the Royal Albert Hall, which you can find on YouTube. And that also opens with Headlock, and I really, really like the live version of it. She does a lot with like loopers and things like that. That's how she does a lot of her music live. And a lot of, yeah, I feel like she programs most of her stuff live. So I would highly suggest.
I haven't seen any of her live performances. Yeah, I should look at that.
I actually hadn't either, outside of the glove things, and whenever because like I said, she's very innovative, so she has like a lot of performances where it's more like improvised, showing off a cool new piece of gear that she has. But I'd never seen her like perform live. And it's like 50. I kind of just like sped through it because he only sent it out like 30 minutes ago. But I really, really liked the live version of Headlock.
I will have to check that out. That is a great song.
I'm reading the rest of his things. I like Miguel's comment is, I feel like I've lived to my advanced age and only then discovered Peter Gabriel. Who is this girl? So I think he's a fan. But I do want to go back to Hide and Seek. Because I'm pretty sure that the way it's done is it's just a vocoder. And so it's less precision and more her playing block chords while singing into a vocoder.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way.
I think that's what it is. I'm pretty sure that it's her singing into a vocoder. I'm sure we can find live performances of it.
That would make it a lot easier than the way that I thought she originally produced it.
That being said, in college, I think this was like the most common song to watch people do, like the photo booth, like 4 cameras doing the acapella. Yeah. I think Hide and Seek was the most popular song to do that too.
I do find it interesting that Miguel, because I read over his comments very briefly. I didn't really read in depth, but how he said that song, he doesn't really see it living on like 10 years from now. He said it may be kind of dated by then, but like this album came out almost 20 years ago now, and I'm still seeing that song influence like stuff now, like and it kind of got me reinterested in listening to this album again. It's why I suggested it, was because kids on TikTok are covering this song left and right, and they're doing it like vocally harmonizing and things like that. And you hear this song being sampled in current music still today. And so it's like, I don't know if I agree with that assessment. Like, I don't know.
I think I do and I don't. I think it already sounds outdated in the sense of yeah, like the way that it sounds. It sounds like the time frame it's from. If somebody if this song came out now, I'd probably be like, what the hell is this?
Mhm.
It sounds older, but I think that the idea behind it and the legacy that it's left behind won't. I think that's
Right.
timeless.
And the lyrics and just what it's trying to say and everything. But like, I remember at least at that time, I'd never heard anything like that before. And I think it really kind of set a pace for more experimentation in pop music. Nobody was doing stuff like that at the time. Well, not in the pop sphere anyway. Norma agrees.
It was such a
She
perfectly timed
remembers.
meow.
She remembers 2004.
Tim, you're very quiet.
God, that was almost 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Because I'm worried about, I don't know whether you saw the text message that I sent, but there's a bit of a delay between when I'm receiving what you guys are saying. So I'm trying not to walk on anybody.
Gotcha. I see it now.
Yeah. My usual suggestion for this is maybe exit out of the program and come back. The standard IT,
Okay,
turn it off and on again.
Yep, I will do that. I will be back momentarily.
I gave up on trying to make my own like lists for these, and I've just started taking screenshots.
Makes
as I'm
sense.
sure you can tell. But we always talk about like the charts for it. This was her second album, or really like her third if you count the frou frou things.
Frou Frou, that was only one album, right?
I think so. I think it was only one album.
Yeah. If I remember correctly, that's how I was introduced to her, was through Garden State, listening to that soundtrack, and then
Same.
discovering she had a band and checking them out, and then finding her independent work.
Yeah, so they only have the one studio album that was released in 2002, and it came after her initial album in 1998, which was I Megaphone, which I remember. And it seems like a song from that was included in I Still Know What You Did Last Summer. So she has just always been on the soundtracks. She is the soundtrack artist.
She makes very soundtrack friendly music.
Yeah. I think that's how most people are introduced to her music.
Mm-hmm.
Is I can recall hearing her voice over several emotional ends of TV shows as like people are driving away from funerals or looking out a window as like rain streams down. It's a vibe.
I mean, she makes me cry, so it makes sense. But yeah, I remember I Megaphone. I don't remember any specific songs from it though.
I remember
this
the cover.
album definitely stood out more in my memory.
Yeah. So I brought up like the charts for it, but I was wondering like how it compared to iMegaphone, and also like coming off of, like we said, Garden State.
How does it compare?
How does it compare? So I was going to pull that up. Oh, I already did pull it, just in a different tab. Is it better for you, Tim?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I can now watch your lips move with the sound that's coming out of my speaker now.
That's usually preferred.
It's not like watching an old Japanese science fiction movie with dubbing.
So it seems like iMegaphone was never promoted. The label it was with, Alamo Sounds, just never really promoted it, and so it sold very few units. Yeah.
So it didn't really like make any charts or anything?
Yeah, it didn't really go anywhere. I can't really find anything about it. anywhere. Although I know that like after this, she toured with Rufus Wainwright and did a bunch of that stuff. She's a part of a group of musicians that, you know, I listened to a lot when I was in my late teens and early 20s.
Yeah. This is like freshman year of college for me. So
yeah, as I'm talking about it more, I'm like, oh, these are like all the people that like I thought I was really cool to be listening to.
yeah, Rufus Wainwright.
Rufus Wainwright. Also got really into Tori Amos at that time.
It's interesting looking at these numbers because where she does well is in that one segment of the charts, and then only hits 145 in the Billboard 200. And that would be somebody who I would think would not have a lot of staying power. They'd, do one decent album, one decent song, and then everybody would just think that's the only thing she ever did. But I know her name and I know that style and I know it's influential. So that's obviously not the case with her. But maybe what we're seeing here is where, the charts are becoming fragmented. Because what year does Napster hit?
Probably around that same time.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I didn't even consider that, but definitely all that music that I was listening to back then, 2002, 3, it was all torrented. So
yeah, it was so Napster's final update was done in 2002, but we would have already been moved on to like the LimeWire.
Yeah, LimeWire.
Yeah. So I find that very interesting that she hit number 2 on US Dance for the weekly, and then very respectably gets number 6 on the 2006 chart for that segment, and then number 2 in 2007. So it really kind of surprises me that 145 was as high as she got on the Billboard 200.
I wonder if a lot of it has to do with that she's definitely a pop. Like I would consider this to be in like the genre of pop, which is a weird genre when I think about it, but we also always talk about how strange genres are on these calls. But I don't see her being a huge radio hit. Like a lot of the songs, unless they're edited in some way, and I wonder if the reason why she is on the top dance electronic albums or top dance electronic like hits, part of it is like because of a remix.
Sure. I mean, she's very she's pop, but pop encompasses a lot of things, and she's not just kind of simple throwaway pop. She's a very smart writer. She's kind of like Steely Dan. She's progressive pop. She's got a very progressive musical slant, which appeals to smarter people, which don't tend to be the majority. That might I think that would explain a lot. She probably and she probably skews hard towards female listeners, certainly more than male. So so that's gonna ding a bit. But to call, it's a problem with calling musicians pop is that we call them pop because pop means many things, and because most pop is very average, not necessarily super smart, and her stuff is super smart, both from a musical standpoint and from what I can gather from the lyrics that got into my head from a lyrical standpoint as well.
Yeah, she's definitely not Kiss FM pop.
No. Interestingly, on line, when I am on Wikipedia, they define this as alternative rock and electronic, this album, which I could also see that, but it still doesn't quite fit right. But I think I said at the start of this.
Sorry.
No, I was saying she strikes me as like the kind of person who, even reading her biography, which I did on the side here right now, she doesn't really care about anything along those lines. She definitely is just making music because she wants to make music, and I think she's only thinking about it in terms of herself, which is how music should be made, but I think it's very, very evident in her writing especially.
Yeah. I think calling her electronic is, it totally misses the point. I mean, she's a singer-songwriter as much as Joni Mitchell, Joni Baez, Joan Collins, not Joan Collins, Judy Collins. She's a singer-songwriter in the 68, 69, 70s, mold, but she uses electronic for her backing. But I don't think that the electronics define her as much as her songwriting does. I think the electronics are beside the point.
Yeah, I think for most of her music, it's more of just a medium than something that she heavily focuses on. It's just like, oh, well, this is the way that I choose to make music in the
Yeah.
way that I choose to make it.
I think a lot
Yeah,
of these songs you could strip out the electronics and put a standard, guitar, bass, and drums behind it, and you would still have an interesting song.
and I think that's like also the point that like Miguel was making when he was writing to me earlier, which was, he listened to this album and immediately said, "How is this performed live? I need to know." And that's why he went to go look for it. And so it is really worthwhile, I think, to watch her perform live. Is just how does that relate back into it? Because it isn't. If it was like pure electronic, it would be a lot harder to do that. I think the best electronic musicians that I've like a more modern era that I've seen perform live as like the band Disclosure, which is just two brothers, and you should go check out their setup because they wanted to make sure that they were playing their music live, but it's like old school, like techno. It's like some deep house, and they are like, I want to play this live, and their setup is phenomenal.
How do they just do it on a bunch of synths?
Oh yeah, they have like they made their stage presence a thing. They have like rows and rows of all their synths, and I guess it's a huge problem because they have to have like the DAWs on the stage, and because of how stage works, like the wiring for it is ridiculous.
I'm imagining the twins in Scott Pilgrim.
That's what most electronic music is like live. I always think it gets a bad rap, electronic music, because it is just like the whole like press a button, and people don't realize that like a lot of that kind of music goes on. Like it takes a lot of producing and sound design a lot of the time behind the scenes. Sometimes it doesn't, but then how do you do that live? And I think I'm a little bit off topic. I think I've moved slightly farther out than I needed to be. But I do greatly appreciate any artist that like sits in a studio. She did most of the instruments herself. It's why it's a lot of like a cappella things, and it's very sparse, and there's a lot of layering and sounds, and she's found a way that like she's going to perform it live. And she does it really well without sacrificing any of the sounds or really, I think, changing the arrangements that much.
I love that there's a lot of, that was one of the things that kept me listening, was that there's a lot of space there. It's not ultra dense with instruments, and it, and that kind of reminds me of, not exactly, but reminds me a little bit about Portishead. There's I think Beckett used the term atmospheric, which is what I always think of when I listen to them. And even though Imogen Heap's music is very much different than that, but I like that that the music's not thick, because it allows you to pay attention to the vocals and the lyrics more.
Yeah, and she's a great songwriter, like lyrically.
Yeah, and she does a lot of interesting vocalizations too. So it makes sense that the lyrics and the vocals would be the focal point.
I had the lyrics up, but I still had to like go back and look at them occasionally because I wouldn't say that like she's clearly like a great songwriter and a great lyricist, but it's not super heavy-handed in like a singer-songwriter way where like the lyrics are like the main focus, and like even when you pull them apart, it's still song lyrics and they're still written as song lyrics. I am having a problem like fully voicing my thoughts on this album.
I think I get what you're saying. It's not like it's not pretentious in the lyricism.
Yeah.
But
I feel like
it's still very methodical.
I guess maybe it's that it's not so much storytelling, which is what a lot of singer-songwriter and a lot of the things where like you have that sparse focus on the lyrics is it's like a full story that you're listening to from start to finish. It is more of like a song. There's a lot of like the repetition that's very simplistic and like it's more of a vibe.
Right. Yeah, I would not qualify it as like narrative song writing in any way.
There's been a lot of covers of a lot of her songs for obvious reasons, but one of the interesting ones that I found, and I actually really like it as a cover, is Ariana Grande covered Good Night and Go, and it sounds entirely different, like to the point where like I didn't even recognize it as a song for a very long time. And I think that's fascinating, and I think you guys should check it out.
I will. I wouldn't think to listen to an Ariana Grande cover of an Imogen Heap song.
Ariana Grande covers a bunch of weird songs. She also like did a thing with Thundercat where she covered a Thundercat song, and it was really well done.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And she did that with Thundercat?
I think she did it with Thundercat, yeah.
Well, you know, if she's got Thundercat's respect, then she's somebody I think I would have to listen to.
I mean, she's got the chops.
Mm-hmm.
She's an incredibly good singer and performer, and she really likes music, and I feel like she gets a bad rap because of the kind of music that she writes and the persona that she puts forward and how popular it is, but she's a true musician. It's like Weird Al.
Yeah, she's a great singer too.
Weird Al is a fantastic musician.
Yeah, she has an amazing voice.
I'll have to go check her out.
But yeah, I think anytime, like there's this whole cultural phenomenon where anything that is for teen girls is immediately dismissed as frivolous and, you know, kind of shallow. So because she's liked by those types, I think people immediately just kind of shrug her off.
But
like myself, I am also guilty of this. So
yeah, but I mean, people could say the same thing about like the Garden State soundtrack. It's a very specific kind of people and a very specific vibe that I think gets talked about a lot and very much put into a box.
Well,
so
yeah,
it's not
a different box.
But I mean, nothing fits quite neatly into genres.
That's true. Indie millennials. That's who that resonated with.
When she was writing this album, she wanted to make sure that all of the songs sounded different. And so she kept a graph with an X and Y axis where she placed all the songs based on their BPM and their key signature to make sure that she didn't have any overlap.
See, methodical. It shows in the way she puts it together.
Yeah, she definitely put a lot of thought into it.
It's an interesting approach, but there's also something to be said for trying to link an album through related keys and related time signatures. You know, I think about the album that I put out last year was linked by all the songs were revolved around a single 12-tone row. So none of them were actually standard diatonic songs. They were all, 12-tone chromatic pieces. But I don't think if I didn't tell anybody that, they wouldn't know it. But that gives the album a solidity. Relates all 7 pieces together. So but that's an interesting approach that I might try myself, to try to write an album with 10 songs with 10 different keys and 10 different time signatures.
Yeah, I think there's merit to both approaches. It's just different.
This album is definitely more a collection of songs than it is like a album you listen to from start to finish.
Yeah.
It's not a concept album. It's not like, I feel like this album is not necessarily intended to be listened to from start to finish. I feel like it's more a collection of songs. And I'm actually surprised that, I brought up before, like the whole switch over from Just for Now to I Am in Love with You just being very jarring. And it's actually surprising, now that I think about it, that she made sure all the songs were incredibly different, and yet that was the only jarring one for me.
I don't know the lyrics on this well enough, so I have to ask this question. Is it possible that there's a relationship between the lyrics and all the songs that meld this together as a single album?
I don't think so. Mostly because I only know about the lyrics for a few of them. I know The Moment I Said It is about an argument that she had with her boyfriend at the time, and I know Hide and Seek is about her parents, like her feelings during her parents' divorce. So I think that she definitely draws her lyrics and the feelings from moments in her life, but I don't think that it's not like one event happened. I think it's a collection of songs for a challenge that she gave herself of, I am going to finish this album in a year. I already have the date. And so this is just like her sound and her style over the course of a year.
Yeah. I'm just remembering what I can remember of the lyrics superficially, and based on what you just said, are all the songs maybe about relationships?
Maybe. But that, I feel like, is a very broad subject.
Yeah,
that
that's
could
very
be attributed to any, especially pop album.
Yeah, typical of music to talk about relationships.
It's almost like it's a very human thing that affects us a lot. Headlock definitely is about a relationship. Good Night and Go is definitely about a relationship, but I think that that's might be too broad.
Okay.
And I can't really find anything on it. So.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like the songs are all just kind of collections of feelings from just the way that the album feels to me.
Which is perfectly fine. I don't think all albums need to be a coherent idea from start to finish.
No.
I think that they are blended together by her own personal style and her own voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Do we have any thought on what the title means?
That's actually true. The title doesn't have anything. It's not a title of a song on the album at all. So it could just be her voicing her opinion.
Yeah. That would make sense, because all the songs are very, very feelings oriented, very opinionated. I think it's a commentary on, and I don't know, I don't know if she's said this or not, but it seems like the title may be a commentary on, just speaking up,
or voicing
the way.
that things she couldn't talk about in a conversation.
Yeah, that would make sense. Maybe all the songs are a collection of conversations she'd wish she'd had.
But it's hard to say because I don't think I can't find anything. It's not to say that it's not anywhere, but my page one Google search um doesn't seem
Google
to say
doesn't
it.
say?
Yeah, come on, Google. Tell me the inner thoughts of
Ow.
Imogen Heap.
The Google.
I also think about this cover a lot. Like just the cover of the album and just how early 2000s it is.
Yeah.
I feel like this in and of itself is like the visualization of like my teenage years.
I never liked the album cover. Like, because I used to be very meticulous about having all of my albums that I had in iTunes have the correct cover on them. And every time this one popped up in like a shuffle play, I would be like, ugh, I don't like it. I was like, love that. I love the song, but not the cover.
What don't you like about it?
It's I don't know. I don't really know what it's trying to say. It's like a half-assed traced illustration of her. I don't know. As an illustrator, I didn't appreciate it.
It's also not my favorite album cover, but I also think that's because it's just bright white.
Yeah,
and this is from the time where like I had in like, you know, a first generation iPod and like all the album covers would come up and then this one would just be blaring white on the screen. But it is
I
like
also didn't like that part.
It's very nostalgic looking at it. Like I look at this and I know like exactly how old I was when this happened. Like I know the aesthetic that went around this time frame. It's just it's so 2000s to me.
I think for me, like I really resonated with album covers that were very stylized, and this is just very simple, and it just wasn't my favorite aesthetic.
Yeah. I don't have like a lot of things like to like discussion points for this album.
The typeface is nice.
The stylization where everything is uppercase but the I is lowercase. Which might just be a callback to iMegaphone.
I was thinking that, yeah.
Yeah, which I believe is
who
also
did this
an
album art?
anagram.
I need to know.
Her boyfriend.
I think her boyfriend did.
Oh, that's why.
That's why you don't hire relatives to do work for your art.
But now that we're saying like the speak for yourself, but the I is lowercase, which I'm pretty positive is just a reference back to iMegaphone. Because iMegaphone is an anagram for her name. I'm used to that. That's what an anagram is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think that it's interesting, and I don't know if this was intentional or not, but the I being number one, the first letter of her first name, but also the first person pronoun being lowercase, and the album title is Speak for Yourself. I don't know. Maybe not.
Yeah, that's where I was like, I'm not sure if it's a reference back to her previous album, which I think is also stylized with a lowercase I. Or no, it's just separate.
Oh.
I guess she just always does a lowercase I. And I wonder if a part of that is because an uppercase I is just an L. And she didn't want to be Imogen.
I don't know. You could put the hashes on it and make it an obvious I.
But this is something we may never know.
As an English lit degree holder, I overanalyze stuff like that. So I don't know if it was intentional or not, but
All right. Does anyone have any final thoughts before we head out for the evening?
I'm just really surprised that you guys have this very, very hard opinion about. I mean, I could see it going either way, but you guys seem to have a very harsh opinion about this album cover.
Well, I think here is the critical point here is that both Beckett and I remember this album from like our younger years. And I
Mhm.
bet there's like an album that you had when you were younger that you were just like, boy, I love this album. And you're like, but I'm just going to put it back because I don't like the cover.
yeah,
I don't
it's
know.
not a cover that I would like put on display. Like if you were to hang album artwork in your house or something, this is not one that I would choose. You know what I mean? I don't know. It seems like a lazy design. As a designer, that's just how I see it.
Speaking of that, apropos of nothing, but sort of kind of that, there's a new documentary out that both of you might be interested in seeing. I don't know if it's out in theaters anymore, but it should be streaming somewhere. It's called Squaring the Circle. And it's a documentary about Storm Thorgerson and Aubrey. Aubrey, what was his last name?
Oh,
It's about Hypnosis, the
yeah.
Hypnosis design firm, which did everybody who was anybody had their album
Oh, I
covers
heard about that.
by
Yeah.
Hypnosis
we've-
back in the 70s. Aubrey Powell was the other guy's name.
I think you
Yeah.
did you bring that up in the last
I
Music
brought this
Festival?
up because Hypnosis did all of the covers for Pink Floyd.
Oh, that's what I remember.
So I think all except for one, like their very first album, like all of that album art was done by Hypnosis. That is probably the thing that they are most famous for is Dark Side of the Moon.
But they are most famous for their work for Pink Floyd, but they were pretty much doing everybody who was anybody back then, back in the late 60s and during the 70s.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up because we did talk about that on the Pink Floyd call. And I specifically looked them up because of that. Like I don't have like a lot of knowledge on Hypnosis outside of that, but I remember being like, no, I want to know more about this.
Yeah.
So it came
check
out
out
at a
the
great
trailer.
time.
Yeah, Storm passed away 2 years ago. I think Aubrey's still alive. Yeah, check out the trailer and see if it's something that interests you. I'm sure it's streaming but it must be streaming. It played at the Laemmle theaters last week or the week before, so I'm sure it's available on streaming somewhere now.
If it is, I'll find it. And if not, I'll still find it. It might not have been released yet based on like what I'm seeing. It might just not be for home theater yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to check that out.
Yeah, if you like art and design, I think you'll find it fascinating.
No, I never think about art and design.
Right.
After
we all do. So.
Okay, so sorry to go off the topic here, but back to the cover. I just clicked on a YouTube playlist of the album just to see what order everything was in, and they applied a filter to the cover and blew up the picture so that it takes up more space, and already I like this a lot better.
Oh, I gotta look.
Anyway,
I wasn't expecting her the art for this to really get
it has
such a huge topic.
It's so funny because it has such a distinct place in my mind, and like you were saying, like you and I this was a seminal piece of of music in our youths. And so I think that's why I have such strong opinions about it.
Yeah, there were a few albums that were from this time where, like, I don't know, I always just think about it. Hot Fuss by the Killers came out in 2004. So did Three Cheers. Yeah, My Chemical Romance came out in
Oh,
2004.
love My Chemical Romance.
So many, like, I'm just saying this, like, based on album covers that I distinctly, like, remember and have
I
stuck.
can see that album
Yeah.
cover is so ingrained in my brain.
But again, I don't think this is necessarily like these are album covers that, like, we know for art purposes. It's just that, like, this was a time frame where they were always in front of you when the music was playing.
Mhm.
Like, you could play, like, you could put on, like, a vinyl and then put the cover somewhere else. You might not
Right.
necessarily be looking at it unless you lay it up on it, like some people
Yeah,
do.
this is the iTunes iPod generation. And like, that's why I was so meticulous about having the correct cover and not just like an image of the cover. Like, so because some people would upload like a picture of the cover or like a altered version of it or something, but I would always have to have the correct one so that when it popped up on my iTunes or on my iPod, I could see it going with that song. So
I still do that on my iPod.
well, now I just stream everything, so it's not as important.
Yeah.
I looked up music from, like, the year that, like, albums that were released in 2004, and I just had, like, a wave of nostalgia, and I have to go listen to Death from Above 1979. I saw the album cover and I was like, I remember this album cover, and I was like, I remember no songs from this album, but apparently I listened to it a lot, so I need to go ahead and go do that.
Think about that you were
Nostalgia.
also 19 years younger when these albums came out.
I think that whatever music you listen to between the ages of, like, 13 and 18 is just the music you listen to for the rest of your life.
I don't know. My tastes have changed quite a bit.
My tastes have as well, but boy, oh boy, Taking Back Sunday, I will still sing in the car.
Well, yeah.
I'm very happy to say that I don't listen to Ted Nugent too much anymore.
That's fair.
So anyways, any final thoughts on this album, or shall I let you guys go for the evening?
I just
All
have a
right.
feeling he like drew it in MS Paint or something. Just
Look,
You're not
Imogen
going to
Heap
let
got
this go,
all
are
of
you?
Imogen Heap got all of the inventive creativeness in this relationship.
It's true.
Is your final opinion on this?
Yes.
At least it's not a bitmap.
Who knows? Maybe it is.
Hmm.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining me tonight, and I will post the next song picks on Saturday. So keep an eye out for that, and I hope to discuss this album and future albums with you guys in the
In the
future.
comments. Yes.
Yeah.
Make sure you pick something with a good album cover.
No, because then we can't rail on it.
All right. Have a good evening, guys.
See you guys later.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.